Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody. So this is our 2019 lecture series that we've just started, and we were sort of encouraged by last year when we took a punt and brought some speakers from overseas about interesting angles on improving child wellbeing with the response that we got. So thank you for making the time today. We're really excited to actually have with us today someone from Decatur, Illinois. I've been practicing that one. I keep wanting to say Decanter, but Decatur, Illinois. And Shelith is going to talk to us about the experience that she's had as a prison warden working with the women's program and the mother and babies particularly. And I've had the benefit, of course, of being able to listen to her over the last few days, interacting with other groups, and to learn. There's just such richness in what you've done. So I'm really excited for you to be able to share that with us. And it's quite interesting as well, being from almost like from the government side, looking at the services that can be provided versus what we've historically done is look at it from the support services side. So that's a really interesting angle, and hopefully for you in the audience as well. So without much more ado, I'll pass over to you, Shelith. But just by way of background, is you're doing a little brief stint at the moment with the men's prison. So that's really interesting as well, to provide different perspectives on working in the women's establishments versus the men's. And but most of what you're going to talk to us about is that experience that you've had with the woman. So please, let's invite.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I hope everyone is well. Kia ora. Thank you. Oh my gosh, Denise, thank you so much for inviting me out. Your staff, they have been amazing. Wendy, and she's here with us today. The entire staff, I mean, PSN is amazing. They have made sure that we've eaten. They've made sure that we've been transported and that we learn a little bit about what's going on in New Zealand as well as the New Zealand prisons. So this is I'm very humbled by this opportunity, and I appreciate you all as well for coming out and being here today. I am very excited about what I've been learning about the New Zealand prisons too, because it's mutually beneficial, the opportunity for me to come here. So I have a chance to learn about what's going on here in New Zealand, in your beautiful home. I just can't get over. Hopefully I won't start gazing out on the mountains and then forget my purpose for being up here, but really I'm very excited. So I have worked for the Illinois Department of Correction in various roles since 2005. And so I've worked with the director and the executive staff and setting policy and also supervising volunteers as well as communicating with advocacy groups for children as well as for prisoners in general. Fast forward, I became the warden of the Decatur Correctional Center, which is one of 2 prisons that we have in the state of Illinois, and that was in 2010. I was there for about 8 years before being reassigned at a male facility, which is all very brand new for me. So I'm having a chance to learn as well, and I had a chance to visit Auckland male facility since I've been here too, and it's a multi-level facility. So thank you all so very much for having me. So we will, if I am able to master the clicker, I think that we'll be able to move forward. So the Illinois Department of Correction, a gender responsive perspective. Gender responsive. That's language that has changed. You know, we really used to really focus on, we're going to be gender specific, or we're moving more toward gender informed and gender responsive, so that we are making sure that we are being specific to the needs of individual women as they transition through the Department of Corrections. So the mission statement and goals of the IDOC is to serve justice in Illinois and increase public safety by promoting positive change in offender behavior, operating successful reentry programs, and reducing recidivism. So it's my understanding that the Department of Corrections here has a goal of reducing the population by 30% over the next several years. And so that's similar to us. We're looking at reducing our population by 25% by 2025. That seems to be, that's a pretty close goal to set for just that time period. But we're doing some things like sentence reduction credits that we're allowing our prisoners to participate in, whether it's good time, and also some programs that will allow them some supplemental sentence credits to allow them to leave earlier if they meet the criteria. The mission statement for the Division of Women and Family Services, which is now, I'll talk a little bit about that as we move on, the Women's Justice Initiative, to provide within the guidelines of appropriate custodial care a continuum of programs and services beginning with reception and continuing through parole, which addresses the unique medical, social, psychological, educational, and community reintegration needs of the committed female offender. Actually, right now, there is a group I should not say right now, the time changed. So it is afternoon right here. So I should say it's probably evening now in Illinois. So earlier today, there was a group that met with lawmakers. This group does not believe that women offenders should be incarcerated, that there are other ways to, at least the majority of them should not be incarcerated. So they met with the legislature today, as well as the governor's wife, just to really get people informed of their beliefs and their cause. So that happened earlier today. I like to say it's going on right now, but it happened earlier today. So when I get home, I would like to definitely find out what happened and how the reaction is to their cause. The Women and Justice Division objectives: identify common pathways to prison that are gender specific to women, indicates the importance of trauma-informed practices in female prisons, and understand the need for gender-specific programs and services for the female offender. There are people who believe that an offender is an offender is an offender. So it doesn't matter if the prisoner is a male or a female, that you can manage them the same way. For many, many years, the Illinois Department of Corrections managed women in a way by following policies that had been established for men. And so a lot of that is changing now. So we're really excited. Modern day female offenders. Just to give you an idea, the female population is growing at a much faster rate than men. I'm hearing that that's the case here in New Zealand. Identified need of gender-specific programs meet gender-specific issues of the female population again. And the initial development of the Women and Family Services Division was May of 1999. And so I would like to say that we've continued through and always had a Women and Family Services Division, a division that just focused on women's issues. But we've also had directors who have come in and had a different view, and the administration that has different views as well on whether that division was needed. And so they did away with it, moved women back into the adult male population. However, in 2017, the Women's Justice Initiative has now, through the legislature, codified the women's division. So now a director can't come in and make changes and say, we don't want it, we're going to throw it out again, because now it takes a vote of the legislature in order for them to dismantle the progress that we've made in our division. So this is these are the female institutions that are in the state of Illinois. Decatur Correctional Center is a minimum security facility, which is where our Moms and Babies program is. And Logan Correctional Center, that's where the receiving and classification happens. It's a multiple level security facility. So there's anywhere between minimum and maximum security would be there. The Women's Treatment Center We'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward too. And Dixon Springs, which is a boot camp that there's a lot of controversy surrounding whether boot camps even work. And so the women were being managed by the male population. So now we brought them in so we can make some decisions about moving them and exactly what we need to do to actually see if we're going to keep them in those programs or do something different with them. And I know we're going to do something different with them. Pathways for women are certainly different than pathways for men in terms of how they enter the corrections path. And so women in prison are more likely to have experienced sexual abuse and other forms of victimization. A large portion of women have abused substances. And I think we've talked about that here too. And because of that substance abuse, they find themselves committing crimes. For the Decatur Correctional Center, those are mostly low-level, nonviolent crimes. But what they're doing is they get money for drugs that they are seeking to, in many cases, self-medicate because of the trauma that they've experienced in their lives. Women in prison are more likely to experience co-occurring disorders. We talked about that. I've been able to have some discussions with the Family Works staff and just how that continues to occur and what we need to do in terms of mental health, awareness and assistance, and treatment for women who are addicted to drugs. Illinois had a total of 2,900 adult females in 2015. That number is now about 2,000. And what she looks like, she's about 37 years old. The males are about 7 years younger. And in Illinois, 45% are African American, 45% are white, 9% are Hispanic, and 1% Native American. Now, in the male facility, you change that, and over 60% are African American that are incarcerated in the state of Illinois. I know that that's some of the issues that is some of the issues that are being discussed here in New Zealand as well, as far as the minority population and being in prison. The female offender is substantially more likely to be serving time again for a drug offense and less likely for a violent crime. 4 out of 10 women reported having had a full-time job prior to their arrest. 4 out of 10. 37% had an income of about $600 per month. Nearly 30% reported getting some type of welfare assistance before. The impact on families, 80% of them are mothers. So when you think about that number, 80% are mothers. So what happens to those children that are left out in the community when their mothers are incarcerated? 65% of them have children that are under the age of 18. So we have children. First of all, let me just back up a little bit. When a mother goes to prison, only 20% of that time the children are with the father. So many times, and they're blessed when they go to a caregiver that takes care of them. The grandmothers, a lot of times, are the ones who get them. But sometimes they are leaving their children in the custody of people that abuse them. So when you think about that, and they're in prison now, it's really very difficult for them to be able to process many times, because now they have clarity of mind and thought, and their children are many times not being taken care of, or they don't know if they're being taken care of. So in 2015, 106 babies were born to offenders within the Illinois prison system. So this is 2019. So in 2017, we were having a really difficult time with being able to place mothers in the babies unit. We only had 9 pregnant offenders at that time that were being screened. Every prisoner can't go to that and participate in that program. And we were trying to decide why. And so we reached out to the Chicago Cook County area, which is the largest area in the state of Illinois. And we were finding out that some of the judges were making decisions that when they were nonviolent offenders, that they would, instead of sending them immediately to prison, that they would wait until they had given birth and then send them to prison. So that would give them an opportunity to be on the outside and deliver. Now we have about 32 over in 2018 that gave birth while they were in prison. Just because a woman enters prison does not make her stop being a mother, a daughter, a sister, a wife. She still has all those roles. She's in prison now, and so now she's a convicted felon, which makes being in those roles difficult. So let's talk about Decatur Correctional Center. It's in Decatur, Illinois. Decatur, Illinois is in the heart of central. It's central Illinois. So if you want to get to the state capital, it's about 40 minutes west. If you want to go to where the University of Illinois, which is a huge university in our state, it's about 40 miles east. And then if you want to go to another university in another larger city than Decatur, it's about 40 miles north. So we're definitely in the center of Decatur, of the state, about 2.5 hours southeast of Chicago. You guys know where Chicago is? Or at least on the map? Anybody been to Chicago? All right. Oh gosh, I'm so excited. I grew up in Chicago, so I'm very excited. And I know you guys hear a lot about Chicago. I still love Chicago because Chicago's my home. So the Mom and Babies program, I think that you want to hear a little bit about that. So some history of the program. I have here that the program is housed at Decatur Correctional Center since 2008, but that number is actually 2007. So the program is now about to be 12 years old. So there was a contingent of people that were very interested in prison nursery programs at that time in Decatur and in the Department of Corrections. And so they were very excited about it. They went to the director at that time and indicated that, they wanted to research and go to some other places. And so they went out to Bedford, New York as one of the institutions that they looked at. And they were able to glean, a lot of knowledge in terms of how they operate their program, but then wanted to make sure that we tailor it to Decatur and what that means. And so in New York, I believe at that time, they had all the women in a dorm setting. And so the mothers and the babies, they all in several different security levels, they were all in one area. And so that was something that we didn't want to do. We wanted to make sure that mothers and their children and their babies were in their own room, and so that they'd have their own time and make sure that they're the ones who are taking care of their babies and there were no conflicts. And we wanted to also make sure everybody was safe because it was very brand new. There were a lot of eyes on us to see if this program was going to really be something that we should embark upon. Staff, they were not yet ready to accept it. They were very against having babies in prison. I even had a friend of mine that said to me, "You mean my tax dollars are going to pay for babies in prison?" And then I had to really explain to her what the benefits are. And so now I will say, just fast forward, the staff at that prison, they believe in the program. You'll hear some of the people that said, I totally was against bringing babies into this facility, but what I've seen and how I've seen it affect the moms and those children, I am totally for it. So all of the pregnant women in the state of Illinois that are incarcerated, they are screened for this program. That doesn't mean that they're able to participate. It means that we try to determine as soon as they come into the receiving and classification unit if they are going to be able to participate. So what happens is we find out if they have nonviolent crimes, they have to also be screened through the Department of Children and Family Services to make sure that they have no crimes against children and no active cases out there. And so those are just some of the criteria that they have to adhere to before they can participate in the program. There's room for 8 moms and babies at that location. And so, so far, 89 out of 95 participants have been successful. So we're looking at, they just told me this because last year we were around an 80% success rate. So we've moved closer to a 90% success rate with that program. So life on the unit, the moms have school, They have issues that in order for them to be able to focus on their pathways to prison and their criminogenic path and basically what those issues are that landed them in prison. Not the crime, but those issues that they really had to deal with that really got them to that point where they were committing crimes. So basically, if there was trauma in their backgrounds, if there was domestic violence or drugs, whatever that main reason was, their staff that are available that help them with dealing with their issues so that we can get them to successfully transition back into the community. In addition to that, we have staff that work directly with the baby. So we have a child development aide. That child development aide, she makes sure that she and the moms go out with security to the children's welfare visits. And if there are any other needs for the children to go out of the facility, the mom goes with them. If the children need things like food or even some clothing, the child development aide is the person that goes out and takes care of that. The rest of the staff, they're focused on the mother and what her issues are and how we get her to really internalize and go deep so that she can start to deal with why she's there and what her path is on the way out to be successful. So that being said, people want to know, okay, how, are the babies prisoners? Do you have custody of the babies? We don't. The baby really is. We have physical custody of the baby, but the baby is still the mom's responsibility in prison. We have caregivers that are other prisoners that help the mom if she's in school or if she's at a group or at even if she just needs a break, they are there. The mom signs them out just as if she was going to daycare. So she signs them out. There's a piece of paper that she signs what time the baby ate last, what time the baby's diaper was changed last, and how much the baby should be eating and the baby's medical needs. And then she takes that baby bag and she passes it on to the caregiver while she's taking care of things. Even though there are caregivers who are prisoners that are trained to help them, even though they're there on the unit with them, it's not their expectation to raise the mom's child. They're there to help and not there to take over. There are times that moms need breaks, though. And so there are times that we've addressed moms who have had postpartum, and we've had to give her a break, and the caregiver has had to go in and take care of the baby for a longer period of time. But we've made that work, depending on what the individual issues are for the mom and the child. The layout of that unit is, again, I think I told you that the moms have their own rooms. And so they have their own rooms, but they share a restroom with another mom and her baby. They come out of their room, and then there's a general day room. There's another nursery. So really, all the ladies on that unit, they're helping to take care of the moms and each other. So it's a quasi-familial type situation. And so they really do, if there's something going on, they're going to let staff know there's a mother in trouble or there's a mom that's doing something that's really good that's going on. There are resources. Well, before I go to that, the length of participation, we usually have moms there for up to 24 months after they deliver. However, up to 3 years, we can send them to the Women's Treatment Center along with their babies and babies that they brought that they already had out in the world. They can bring them to the Women's Treatment Center if they meet the criteria. The women that are in this program, they meet the criteria. And so I have a story. There's a young woman that she had 4 other children on the outside. She'd never taken care of those children. Her mom had taken care of them. And so I even had pushback from staff who thought we shouldn't even allow her to participate in the program because they would say she didn't take care of other kids. She didn't care about her kids. Why is she in prison? That's so very judgmental when you have no idea what her story is and what her path to corrections is. And so we gave her the opportunity to participate in the program, and she really shone. She ended up taking her child once she MSR'd or once she paroled out, and they went to the Women's Treatment Center. She brought her other kids, and we went to visit her, and she told me, she said, I had never, ever raised any of my other kids. My mom took care of them. I never had to worry about them because my mother did a great job. She said, but this program really helped me to be a better mother to the children that I already had. One other program that we have that works and that helps that to happen, we have a reunification program that's also on the same unit with the moms and babies. And I have another story about that too. But so that means while she was incarcerated at the Decatur Correctional Center, she and her baby were housed there, but her other children could come and visit her for long periods of time, not in a sterile visiting room where they just have to sit there and not be children, but actually go to the housing unit. The caregiver drops them off at the prison to the counselor. The counselor walks them back where the mom is waiting on them at the door of her housing unit. They go in there for about 5 hours. We have some structured activities as well as unstructured. Most of the time they're unstructured activities. Maybe she wants to comb her hair or talk about what happened over the week or help with homework. Those are all things that they're able to do. And if a caregiver was close enough and could bring the children to the mother every day, we would allow them to come in and spend time with their moms. And so as a result of that, she said this program, those programs together made her a better mom. She never returned, except for to come back to celebrate one of our anniversaries and to show us that she was really doing a good job and very excited about being a mother to her children. We have resources in addition to our counselors and in addition to our other staff that are on that unit. TASK, which is Treatment Alternatives for Safer Communities, they provide 2 additional staff. One person works with the moms inside. They have groups on being better parents, dealing with substance abuse. It's not treatment, but it's education, and they have a chance to share. And she helps them with their issues while they're on the inside. Once they parole out and go home, there's another staff person from TASK, and we have a contract with them. They follow the moms for up to a year. They help them with housing. They help them with any of the issues that they are facing as part of their transition back out into the community and helping them with their reentry. And so they send us pictures of the children as they're getting older. Can you tell that we somehow get attached to the children when they leave? But they send us photos, so we're able to keep track of them. They tell us when they're doing a good job. They tell us when they're not. But they're at least there. I wish it could be longer, but they're at least there for that first year to really help them with their transition and whatever their issues are, with housing, job search, daycare. They're able to, it's a case management approach to an inside out approach for when they enter the facility and when they're leaving. We have a zero budget for the Moms and Babies program. We only have dollars in our budget for the moms. So what happens is, and how we're able to take care of the babies, definitely through donations, but the moms are able to apply for those social service benefits that they would be able to apply for on the outside. And so we manage that for them. And so when I talked about the child development aid and going shopping for their formula, and if there's a nursing mom and needing additional food, she would go shopping. And for us, it's a local Walmart. And so she would go out to the supermarket or whatever, and she does that. But those dollars, we help them to budget that so that we can be able to, through these very wonderful collaborations, we're able to have this program. And so the Department of Human Services works very closely with us when we bring them in, as well as, and I mentioned the Department of Children and Family Services as well. We have volunteers that come in and they read to the babies, they participate in tummy time. And so we are just so blessed by the people that come in and want to support women and children. The reunification, and we have video visitation programs, but the reunification program, again, allows mothers and children to spend unstructured and structured time to create and sustain bonds during the mom's incarceration. Why do we do these programs? Well, first of all, it's so important for moms to bond with their children during those very formative years, but especially even as they get older and they still need their mothers. Just because they're incarcerated doesn't mean that a child doesn't want to be with their mother. Even if their mother has done some really horrible things, you still find that children have that attachment, that maternal attachment to them. And so we help manage that through our programs. So I have a story. This is Olivia. Can you see her? Yeah. This is Olivia and her mother, Tabitha Weeks. Tabitha's husband died. Tabitha started drinking. Tabitha had a car accident and killed someone. So after years of court cases, she goes to prison. So Olivia has lost her only parent. She's an only child from what they thought, to her being incarcerated. Olivia is now in her second semester at Harvard. Because of the reunification program, Olivia was able to spend time with her mom, talk through everything that was going on with her. Her caregiver would bring her to Decatur so that she could spend those extra hours with her. I watched her mother raise her from prison with the assistance of others. She was always very involved with what was going on at school, what was happening in her life. She was a model prisoner. She didn't get disciplinary tickets because she didn't want anything to keep her from being able to have her visits with her daughter. She didn't want to be kicked out of that program. She put her daughter first. And so as a result, we started to see Olivia. She was coming in, showing off all of her accolades. Her grades were, they were just really very, very high. And then before her mom went to prison, she was 12 years old when her mom went to prison. She said, I was just an average kid, but I wanted to change the narrative when my mom went to prison. I didn't want people to think of me as, well, that's another child who, her mom's in prison and she's just an average student. She's just an average kid. She said at that time, she wanted people to see her relationship with her mom through how much she was able to excel. So then Ivy League schools started looking at her. And she was accepted at Harvard University. She was able to come back to the prison, thank the volunteers, thank people who had helped her during her mom's incarceration. And as you can see, her mom is no longer incarcerated either. So for us, we're very proud of the success. We're very excited about their future, not just her future. We're very excited about their future. And it's just such a warm, good feeling, because can you just imagine how she felt when her mom left? Just during that transition, the caregiver started having some issues and she wasn't able to bring her to participate. But Olivia turned 16. So she could drive herself to the prison, but she couldn't sign herself in because she was a minor. One of the other ladies on that housing unit was local, and her mother said, I will help. Her mother, who's not a prisoner, her mother, who is just someone who lives close by, she met her at the prison every weekend and signed her into the facility so that she could visit her mom. So there are just so many people that stood in the gap for them, and not just them, so many others. Olivia is one success story. We have so many others, but we wanted to share her because we really watched her just move through life with the assistance of her mom. I would always go back there, and she was there visiting. And so it's just a really proud moment. And she said, despite all the ridicule, my mother's crime and subsequent punishment did not make me want to distance myself from her. It actually made me want to stand out as her greatest accomplishment, an endeavor which transformed me into the woman I am today. She included that in her application to Harvard. Other programs that we have at the Decatur Correctional Center, we have Shakespeare Corrected. We have a Millikan professor that comes into the facility every year. We're on the 7th We've had 7 plays there because he was committed to bringing Shakespeare into the prison. The first play, they were so nervous. They were reading their scripts, but it was still very good. It's a 9-month process. He comes in, they start talking about the set, they build the set, they play the music, they do all the artwork with the assistance of the university. And so that is just such an awesome program. And then we allow family members to come in so that they can see the work that they've done. There are women that have told me, I have never set a goal before and actually accomplished it. Can you imagine that? Never accomplishing a goal? And so something like this, they were able to show their families, look at me. I started this and I completed it. And so they would all come in and be so very proud. The Mom and Me Camp, Olivia participated in that. That's where we have volunteers that collect all the money for about 45 children to come, and they're able to stay at a campsite at night, but then during the day they go in and they spend time with their moms. And so the way that it looks on Sunday night, they arrive, they go to the campsite, they play, they have a great time. Some of the children from urban communities, they've never ever gone to camp before. And this is someone who is making sure that they get to do that. Monday morning, they get on a school bus, they go to the prison and spend 5 hours with their mom, go back to the campsite, and this continues on until about Wednesday when they go back home. But again, that's just one more opportunity, and we're so blessed by volunteers that help us to be able to continue creating bonds and establishing family connections. We have a dog grooming where there's a philanthropist in town that provides over $700 worth of kits to the women once they complete the program and are licensed. When they go home, they have this kit. Most of them are immediately hired by PetSmart and some of those other pet stores, but they also can start their own business. And we've seen women do that as well. That's one of our industry programs. The sewing shop is the other. So my assistant director, she was so very excited about me coming here and sharing with everyone. She wanted to make sure that I talked about, as we move forward with our women and justice initiatives. So here we are. Okay, so there are 3 main areas of concentration. Number 1, offenders-centered assessment for rehabilitation is our demand. Number 2, resource optimization and alignment, supply. And number 3, operations and culture transformation, which is change. So in March 2015, we conducted a comprehensive gender-informed practices assessment at Logan Correctional Center. Logan is a facility that was developed as a male facility, but when our multi-level facility closed in another part of the state, they took 2 prisons and they moved those women into a facility that was designed for men. We did some rehab, but really not enough. So we moved them over there. For some of those women, they are serving life. And when we talk about life in prison in the U.S., that's life. That's physical life in prison. And so that being said, we went in, we conducted an assessment which included staff interviews. It also included surveys and talking to the women and talking to the staff. Initially, we wanted the male facility staff to move over with the males when they went to another prison. But because of collective bargaining, we were not able to be able to do that. So what happened was you had staff who had never worked with women, didn't want to work with women, and you had women who knew that. So during the interviews that I participated in, I asked them, so tell me about life here with the women. And the staff that I interviewed said, we don't want them here. We never wanted them here. Nobody gave us a choice, so here they are. And then when I interviewed the women, they said, well, they don't want us here. And they knew that. And so right now, that was in 2015 when we conducted that survey. As a result of the work that was done, the women's division has been codified in terms of the legislature voting on keeping them as a viable division, because there needs to be work there to make sure that they are safe, our staff is safe, and that they are secure as they transition and as they stay in the Department of Corrections. So that, as a result of that study, the findings and recommendations guide the department's efforts in terms of how we develop female-centered practices and effectively reduce the female population and successfully reintegrate them back into the community. Number 2, which is the supply, IDOC is realigning our resources so that we determine on programming at the right, if you think of medicine, what's the right dosage for them to be able to be successful. And so then number 3, which is change. IDOC is incorporating offender rehabilitation, hiring, and training within the department's best-in-class security-driven practices. So when we think about like the Moms and Babies program, that was never an evidence-based program. However, now we are putting some tenets in place so that we can begin to measure. But the department really is more focused on evidence-based practices. This model, I'll probably tell you a little bit more about it as we move for discussion, but this is a model that basically that starts out at the transition, when you first enter the reception and classification, where people are screened. You move to the next phase. Okay, what are we doing in terms of training? What are we doing in terms of helping them with developing skills to handle their pathways to prison and what they need to do to be able to move forward as they try and start their moves toward a successful reintegration. And then 3, it's, how long they're there. When they're there, during their IDOC stay, what are some of their issues? They need to tell us. We need to be able to assess them and continue that assessment throughout this model. And then there's, pre-release. What are we doing to help them as they're getting ready to move out into the community? Those pre-release and reentry needs and guidelines and being able to have things like parole as support. So we can talk a little bit about that more as I get closer to my model and be able to see that. So leadership and philosophy. In 2017, Illinois enacted the Women's Correctional Services Act, again codifying the Women's Division of IDOC. Female-centered strategic planning and guidelines with policy development and implementation of gender-responsive practices. The assessment and classification, gender-responsive classification and assessment system. It includes a historical custody classification instrument that includes clinical risk, recidivating, what their needs are, and there are new instruments that are being utilized, and learning analytics about violence and predictions. How much what in terms of violence, what are the predictors of future violence as well as violence in their backgrounds, and need assessment tools. The classification and assessment system enables counselors. I don't know, we didn't get a chance to talk about counselors here and their roles, but we have counselors at our facility. We have clinical counselors that basically provide programs based on assessments of the females and the males in our facilities and what those needs are, and they effectively are data-driven. Comprehensive case management. We are, now that I'm in the men's division, I'm starting to really look at ways to program men, because we do a good job with programming women, but being able to program men. And so what's the appropriate program and treatment dosage in terms of how we move forward with community supervision and external support, as well as when they're inside. Prioritizing, optimizing resources to address individual risks and needs of females for placement, treatment, and programming. There are limited resources, but those limited resources are basically utilized on the true high risk and high need population. Programming and treatment delivery realigned to, again, evidence-based and best practices. Female housing units are now specific to For example, if there are females that are all working on drug treatment, they may end up in a drug treatment house, or, mental health and education and stability. And so there are subpopulations in each facility. And how do we best measure success? How do we best house them so that they are able to work together along with our staff to be able to be successful? Workforce development, engagement with community, business, and the social sectors. We need outside partners that are going to help us help people transition back into the community, because returning citizens are going to work in our restaurants. They are going to work beside us, and we'll never even know that they are. So don't we want them to come back and be better than when they went in? So engaging our workforce and the offender population on transformation. Engaging, aligning, and training staff to fulfill the purpose of rehabilitation. We're the Department of Corrections. The departments of corrections should focus on rehabilitation, and in many times that word gets lost. And what we do is we lock people up really well. We do a good job in terms of keeping people locked up in the state of Illinois, but what are we doing in terms of rehabilitating? And what are we doing in terms of changing the mindset of staff that feel that we should just lock people up? And so there's training, there's new techniques that they're involved with, as well as new treatment techniques and engagement. How do you de-escalate versus, making situations worse? And gender sensitization. How do you sensitize staff in terms of knowing if someone has trauma in her background, by you going in and banging on her door, that now, you could have sent her into a crisis mode, because that may have been what happened to her on the outside right before she was victimized. And so you have to be very careful about how we work with each other and how we actually manage that female population. Recruit rehabilitation-focused staff wherever we can, such as social workers, counselors, to engage and guide offenders, and shift the culture from punitive to rehabilitative. There are still people that believe that we are there to punish. They were punished when they were deprived of their freedom, when they were sentenced by a judge. That's not our responsibility to punish people when they are incarcerated. But people forget that, and they really want a more punitive model. But that doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for people that are going to be returning to the communities. Shift the culture from punitive to rehabilitative. Reduce the operational use of restrictive housing or similar punitive practices. Deploy new incentives toward rehabilitation. We have found that segregation really doesn't work. So let's try to work on some other areas to really get people to respond to positive reinforcements when possible. That's my presentation, and if you have any questions, please.
Yeah, my question is, what are the measures for success when you talked about a 90% of success rate?
Mm-hmm. The measures of success, that's going to be based on recidivism, and recidivism is measured by 3-year entrances and exits into a facility. So if a person who is paroled out of a prison in Illinois, if they parole out and if they stay out for over 3 years, then that's considered a success.
In regards to the 2 years for mothers in the mothers and babies, what if a mom's sentence is longer than that time? Are they not able to go into the mothers and babies unit, or does their baby have to leave? How do you manage that?
Thanks for asking, because really when the moms and babies, when their sentence is over, they leave the prison together. So when I talked about at Bedford, New York, I know that the babies may leave and the mom still has to finish her sentence. Part of the criteria is that the mom will be able to leave within 2 to 3 years of the child being born. So if a mom has a baby, if we get a mom and she's 1 month pregnant, we have 8 months to work on that mom and her issues before the baby gets there. However, once the baby arrives, we really try and get them moved through our program. Most likely 24 months, but we will deal with individual cases and get them, if it's a treatment issue, we'll get them to the Women's Treatment Center. And if it's they have a little more time and treatment isn't their issue, then we will still try to work with them before we actually decide that they can't participate in the program.
Thank you. Sarah Haywood from the Office of the Children's Commissioner. We monitor the mothers with babies units here in the women's prisons, and I guess I've got lots of questions for you, but I'm interested in what the ratio of corrections officer staff to women in the facilities are for you.
From my understanding, each facility is different, depending on the security level of the facility. And so Decatur Correctional Center is a minimum security, and it's my understanding, I believe it's 1 to 7.
Okay. And is there an induction program for those corrections officers? So you're talking about the importance of training, and is there an induction program for those officers to become corrections officers to work with those women?
Yes, there is. And so previously, I would go out to every training class, even though they may not be working with women, and really give them a presentation on the differences between women and men and how to work with women who are incarcerated. And so that used to be 2 hours. And so now there's actually a full day. That's a lot better than what we had. But there's a full day to train correctional officer trainees who are coming into the facility. And then there's, in addition to that, those who do go to women's prisons, that's part of their cycle training that they have to participate in every year. There's like 40 hours of cycle training, and part of that is working with the female offender. The National Institute of Corrections just came in as well and provided 3-day training, I believe it was, with supervisors in the Department of Corrections Women's Division.
So in terms of that training, in terms of the well-being of the babies and supporting staff, whether it's corrections officers or counsellors, to understand the importance of the mother-infant bond and attachment and how to best support that relationship, I'm just wondering whether that's a key part of the mix of the training that those staff
that is
receive.
definitely a key part of the mix of training. The correctional officers don't provide direct service to the women, but they're still trained. But we have counselors who specify on just that, on how to work with. There's a track that certain staff work directly with the women on their criminogenic issues. And then there's staff that are definitely just for the management and taking care of the infant. So we do, and then we have a contract with TASC, which is the Treatment Alternatives for Safer Communities. They also have staff, and that's what they specify in. And so, yes, we do have specific staff for that nature.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you very much for your talk. It's really interesting. My name's Bronwyn, and I work for the Department of Corrections here. We've been doing a piece of work looking at parenting in women's prisons. So parenting.
I'm sorry.
We've been looking at parenting from prison, so looking at the various issues. And mothers and babies units came up in that. In particular, and I'm interested that you mentioned it, the issue of reintegration support and the fact you give 12 months reintegration support after women leave, because a key issue seems to my mind, and seems to come up in the research, that people in mothers and babies units have a lot of support. It's sort of parenting, they describe it as being like parenting in a bubble, where all the stresses of life kind of get taken away and all you need to do is look after your baby, which is great. But then suddenly you get out and you've got bills to pay, you've got other children, you've got spouses, you've got all these other issues going on. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what kind of support women get in that 12 months and whether it's particular to women and babies and whether it's different to normal reintegrative support. And
you're right, we have heard that they do get, it's like they're parenting in a bubble, because they do have lots of supports on that unit. And that's why we're so happy that we do have that follow-up support through the contract that we have with TASC. And so really, it's a case management model. So whatever the issues are that she's experiencing on the outside, she has someone that will be able to assist her with making proper decisions, with getting into physical housing, helping her with sustainable employment, issues with her children, health care, birth control. I mean, you name it. that's what that person is there to really help mobilize and move her through from incarceration to being out in the world. It's a single person, but it really depends on how many women will actually leave the program during that time. But yes, there's one person that does that. And that's her sole role. I'd like to do that for the rest of the women that are incarcerated, but that aren't part of the program. But as you know, there are limited resources, and the contract is only for the Moms and Babies program.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very encouraging to see such a humane response to the needs of women and their children. I don't think that the New Zealand system is within the... I don't know quite where it is at the moment, and I'm sure my colleagues from Corrections will be able to tell us that. But if there's one piece of advice that you could give us, where would you start? Because you've got a really comprehensive, wide-ranging kind of system that you've evolved, and which is fantastic. Where would you start?
Well, I didn't get a chance to see the women's prison here. So to be able to, I did talk to Family Works. And so for us, it was very critical for the moms and babies not to be separated. That once the baby goes home, the mom goes with her, with her, so that bond isn't interrupted, because those formative years are so very important. And so when they've had that time to just be able to create this bond between them, and then all of a sudden they're pulled away, I think that that's really critical, and that's a piece to really look at. Maybe it works for your department, I'm not sure. But for us, that was why we wanted to make sure that we kept our numbers small so that we would be able to manage that. If a woman has 5 years, then for the most part, she's not going to be able to participate in that program. But I think you really need to look at how you create and maintain those bonds, especially even if the children still are going home. What are you going to do to bring them back in? Something like a reunification program would be really great.
Hi, thank you. How long, just going back to the lady who had the 5th child and then was reintegrated with her other 4, how long has it been so far that she's been doing well?
Gosh, she was one of the first women that I encountered when I started as warden there. So it has been at least 5 years.
Okay, that's great. Did you, and you may have not asked these questions, but what reasons were given by the male corrections officers for not wanting the woman in there? Did they give specifics?
Yes, they believe that women are very hard to manage, that women are very high maintenance, that women always have problems. If you tell them, and this happens, if you tell a male offender to walk in twos, what do? They walk in twos. If you tell women to walk in twos, they're going to ask you, why am I walking in twos? I didn't walk in twos yesterday, and you certainly didn't. She's not walking in twos, so why do I have to do it? And so they don't want to deal with that. And really, you know what? Women have so many issues that men don't have when they go to prison. Again, 80% of the time when a man goes to prison, his children are with their mom, and she's taking care of them. When a woman goes to prison, only 20% of that time they're with the father. And then the grandmas still come over and help the dad, but they certainly don't provide that same type of supportive services to that female when it happens overall. I'm not saying that happens with every situation, but overall. And so they just think that women are so difficult to manage. But they have some real issues. I'm still passionate about the women. I know that they have issues. They have different pathways to prison, and they also have issues in terms of familial issues. 65% of them have children under 18. Sometimes they've left them in the care of their abuser. So how do you handle that? So yes, they might have a bad day one day.
No, that's great, thank you. How did the women feel about having male corrections officers?
They've always had male corrections officers in the state of Illinois. the state is really focused on hiring more females, because the females, if the women go on a medical furlough or go on a trip to court, they still have to have a female there so she can help with making sure that when they are shaking them down, I know that terminology is horrible, but when they're searching them and things like that, we have to have a female that does that.
Just wondering if with your gender responsive practices, do you have anything around women who are giving birth in your custody, and have you been able to develop specific ways for managing pregnant women that's more humane?
Yes. Yes, we have. You have such great questions. So absolutely. So, before, if a woman is giving, first of all, a woman who is pregnant is not shackled in any way. And so when they're going in and out of facility, if for some reason they have to be to keep them from self-harm or harming an officer, there are flex cuffs that are used, and never behind the back or anything like that. Also, women were transported to a hospital to have a baby alone. And so through the Moms and Babies program, if they wanted our staff member there who's a female, then we would allow her to be there. But we've moved forward to be able to allow women to have a family member or someone else to support them during the delivery of their baby. So that's really huge, because I wouldn't want to be alone in having a baby. So just because she's incarcerated, we should really think outside of the box and start screening people so that we can get her some more personal familial support when she's going through that.
So lastly, I just want to thank you, Shelith.
Thank you.
You're so generous, and you've been incredibly open with your gift of sharing and knowledge for us. And I've really enjoyed your company as well.
Yes.
So great conversation.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. And Kenneth, thank you also. You were taking a video down the back there for accompanying her. We hope that you get to have a look around Wellington as you have in Auckland, and we encourage you, it's a little bit windy, but it's a great walk out there on the waterfront. So thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.